Before it became something you casually say on a long drive, it was a place defined by noise, speed, and urgency. A quick stop that could decide outcomes, measured not just in seconds but in precision. The phrase sounds simple, almost obvious, yet the more you think about it, the more specific it feels. So why is it called a pit stop? It's a term we hear all the time in racing and everyday life, but its origin is far more literal than most people expect. To understand it, we have to go back to the earliest days of motorsport, when the word described a real place. Let's take a closer look at how the term began and why it stayed, right here, on History of Simple Things. The word pit in pit stop originally referred to a physical feature on early racing tracks. In the early 20th century, race cars would pull into a designated service area that was often slightly lower than the main track, resembling a shallow trench. This wasn't just a visual choice. Being below track level helped separate cars that were stopping from those still racing at high speeds, adding a layer of safety in an otherwise dangerous environment. These areas became known as the pits, and drivers would enter them whenever their cars needed attention. Because all servicing happened there, any stop naturally became known as a pit stop, rooted directly in the track's design and function. In the early days of racing, cars were far less reliable than modern machines. Engines overheated easily, tires wore down quickly, and fuel systems were inefficient. Drivers often had no choice but to stop multiple times during a single race just to keep their vehicles running. These stops happened in the pit area, strengthening the link between the place and the action. Unlike today's races, where pit stops are fast and carefully planned, early stops could take several minutes and were often unpredictable. Mechanics would fix problems on the spot using whatever tools were available. The term pit stop became common not because it was catchy, but because it accurately described a necessary and frequent part of racing life. As racing developed, teams began to approach pit stops with more structure and planning. Instead of random repairs, specific crew members were assigned clear roles, such as fueling, changing tires, or making adjustments. This shift turned pit stops into coordinated efforts rather than chaotic interruptions. The meaning of pit stop started to expand beyond just the location, referring also to the process itself. By the mid-20th century, pit crews had become an essential part of competitive racing. The speed and efficiency of a stop could influence a race's outcome, making it a strategic element rather than just a necessity. Even so, the name stayed tied to its origins, linking the action back to the physical pit. Even as racing tracks evolved and safety improved, the term pit stop remained unchanged. Modern pit lanes are no longer shaped like trenches and are often level with the track, designed for better access, visibility, and organization. Despite these structural changes, the original term persisted because it had already become deeply embedded in the culture of racing. Commentators, teams, and fans continued using it, reinforcing its place in the sport with every race. Language tends to hold on to familiar words, especially when they are tied to long-standing traditions and shared understanding. By the time the physical pit was no longer a defining feature, pit stop had already become universal. It was clear, simple, and effective, so there was little need to replace it with something more technically accurate. Over time, the phrase pit stop moved beyond the world of motorsport and into everyday conversation. People began using it to describe any short, purposeful stop during a longer journey, especially while traveling by car. The comparison made sense as both situations involve pausing briefly to refuel, rest, or make small adjustments before continuing. The phrase carries a sense of urgency, suggesting that the stop is temporary and focused rather than relaxed or extended. Unlike a full break, a pit stop implies efficiency and intention. This broader use helped the term become widely recognized, even among people who have little or no connection to racing. Modern motorsports have continued to reinforce and popularize the term pit stop. In today's races, pit stops are highly refined and can be completed in just a few seconds. Teams train extensively to perform precise, synchronized actions, turning what was once a slow process into a critical competitive advantage. Broadcast coverage often highlights these moments, emphasizing their importance in keeping the term visible to audiences around the world. Even though technology has dramatically improved how pit stops are performed, the name itself still reflects its early origins. It acts as a link between modern racing and its more mechanical, less predictable beginnings, preserving a piece of history within the language. What makes pit stop interesting isn't just where it came from, but how little the meaning has drifted despite everything else changing around it. The cars became faster, the tracks became safer, and the process became almost perfectly optimized. Yet the name still carries a trace of those early, rough conditions. It's a reminder that language doesn't always evolve at the same pace as technology. Sometimes the words stay behind as quiet records of how things used to work. So when you hear or say pit stop, you're not just describing a quick break. You're echoing a time when stopping in the pits wasn't just routine, but necessary to keep moving at all. Thank you for watching. If you have suggestions for our next video, feel free to share them in the comments below. We'll be sure to give you an acknowledgement for your contribution. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the history of simple things. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more stories woven through the smallest details.